Hello, I'm Steve. A little about myself. I'm a retired law enforcement officer with 20 years of service. I began my career in the jail, worked the road, and became an investigator. During my career, my training consisted of everything from SWAT to becoming a state certified crime scene technician. I've investigated crimes from thefts to homicides. After retiring and becoming aware
Good night,
of true
baby.
crime and web sleuths, I started my channel for web sleuths to better understand the perspectives of law enforcement. Not only do we cover true crime, I go out into the field and assist families who have lost loved ones to homicide and their cases are considered cold. Join me as we look and bring attention to these critical cases.
Hello, everyone. Glad to see y'all tonight. And if you're new to the channel, welcome. While you're in chat, and always be mindful to be respectful of the families, mods, and each other. As always, we'll have a presentation. And while we're having the presentation, if you have any questions about anything tonight, throw it in chat. Mrs. Steve here will get it organized as we move forward. Tonight, we're going to be talking about a lot of in law enforcement what we view as train wrecks, and not saying that this whole case is a train wreck, but we look at the areas that where there are potential threats that exist, that as we prepare for trial, and things that we need to look back on and prep ourselves from the law enforcement standpoint of how we think about it and how we move forward, so that when we're testifying, that we can close up all these little areas that might come up during testimony, and how can we make this case clearer and more understandable to a jury. And law enforcement, all we do is day in, day out is respond to train wrecks. Doesn't matter if it's a domestic, a robbery, or whatever. It's a train wreck for somebody. And so I use that in a very loose term. But when we look at this and we see these threats, on the other side of it, when we look at each area of what's going on in a case. And now there's a lot of people that look at the Delphi case and say, well, it's just one big train wreck. And it, like I said, everybody has their own viewpoints. And are there some areas of this case that could be and probably will be during the court pretty well defined and easily viewed as a train wreck? Yes. That happens in all cases, not just in the Delphi case. Law enforcement, when we go out, like I said, working the crime scenes, your chaos and everything's going up. But last night when I was watching the Drunk Turkey show, they were talking about the Koberger case and that the FBI had returned to that crime scene, and they were speaking about why. And I threw in the chat in there that it's some of the preparation and tying up loose ends, maybe going out and looking at that crime scene, expanding it, because they had reviewed that whole crime scene, and there's certain areas that need to be addressed. They'll go back and do that. And that's the same thing that I believe that law enforcement will do and has, that they've looked at it and they will regardless. Before the prosecution goes to trial, they're going to get with law enforcement, and there's certain strategies, there's meetings, so that we avoid all the train wrecks during the trial, because you don't want those moments of testimony when bad things and so much can happen, that those train wrecks during a trial can just absolutely upend and cause issues about justice being found. And so we have to clarify and make sure everybody understands what's going on with the case. Everything's tied up. What does this mean? What happened? Because there are certain times during the investigations, things go wrong. And you try to eliminate and minimize. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight, guys. But anyway, as we go through the presentation, if you have any questions, we will absolutely address them at the end of it. So let's get started. If you'll bring up the presentation. Yes. Okay. All right. If you have any information regarding this case, absolutely make sure law enforcement has it. And defense, that they're aware for the fact that we do want justice for Libby and Abby. I mean, anyone that would go out and prey upon children, we have to make sure that justice is found, and that and the only way we can do that is make sure law enforcement and the prosecutors and the defense has all the information. So if you have any, absolutely make sure they have it. All right. Here's my little pegboard of where I tied in a bunch of pictures from everything and anything, and we'll be addressing each of these areas as we go through of what the potential of how law enforcement will look at it and prepare themselves for the testimony, and why did they go down certain paths, and what are the hazards of that. You'll have two sides to each area, that no matter the point that the prosecution brings to the case, because they have to prove their case, the defense is going to have an alternative view of it, and they're going to be attacking. So as a law enforcement officer, when you're preparing to go to trial, you have to make sure that you've looked at this case in every sense of being true, and making sure you are accurate and truthful when you're up there testifying, for the fact that if you're not, it's going to come out. And you want to lose a case, you go up there and you try to play some type of shenanigans in the court. And these defense attorneys, they know how to handle shenanigans. They'll absolutely blast you off that witness chair. And so you always have to be properly prepared, and make sure you have all the information, and explain it to the best of your ability, truthfully, honestly, and let the evidence stand for itself. First one is going to be the crime scene. It was the crime scene when the first responding officers come to the crime scene and it was processed. We have a lot of things that were brought up about the crime scene, that K9s weren't brought in. Well, we know that there were some K9s brought there for the fact that they're on some of the video of the newscast crews coming into the area. And so we just don't know what type and discipline each of those K9s had. But that would be something that they will address. Law enforcement will know each step of the process from the time that law enforcement got there and first set up their initial interview with the first person and the individuals that found Libby and Abby at this crime scene. And then they'll look at the steps that were taken, and how well was the crime scene protected, how well was it documented, what resources were brought in, and what, are there mistakes that were made? Were there things overlooked? Were there things missed? Were there things not collected? And of course, we have the stories or rumors, or ever how you want to define them, that some of the items weren't collected for several days, if not weeks. And law enforcement will have to explain that, of why certain things weren't taken. Now, the prosecution, they'll put it in there, and the officer will get up there and he's going to explain that, this is why this was collected, this is why this is collected, and now this is why I didn't collect this. But then when the defense comes up, they're going to look at that same item and they're going to throw it under a whole new total light and say, doesn't this show you what it means in this point of view? And they'll have a totally opposite point of view. And, sometimes you just have to suck it up and say, I agree. And will that happen? I don't know. But if they make mistakes in it, just like we saw with the OJ trial, every time a mistake was made by law enforcement, they hammered it. And we'll see that with this case. If law enforcement messed up during the processing of this crime, they're going to get hammered on it. No ifs, ands, or buts about it, because that's what the defense's job is to do, is make sure that things were properly handled, evaluated, and collected. So the first train wreck that law enforcement will look at is, what are the positive? What did we bring? How did we collect? How professional? And how much evidence did we find, and what did it mean? And then they'll have to look at the other side of it, the bad part, the train wrecks of, we didn't do this, or we missed that. And so that's going to be play a huge part. So the crime scene is one of the first areas that we'll have to look at. Then we'll have the image of the bridge guy, and everything about this image, of the strategy of why it was released, how it was released, why they only played a certain portion of it. The, law enforcement has to look at it and say, this was our strategy. And yeah, he's fine.
Okay.
And, but absolutely that with the bridge guy image, and what was there any type of editing done? And of course, we know there was editing done because it's a clip of 1 point something seconds. I think it's like 48 different individual frames that's put together to create this just under 2 second step. Was that a great strategy, or was that a train wreck? And it has, this one image created so much interest in the case. And so from that standpoint, it was a great thing that law enforcement did, for the fact that regardless, whatever interest is generated, and how did this may possibly have an effect on the offender. And if the offender is Richard Allen, that is this what drove and kept him to ground so that he wouldn't go out and seek other victims? And if he is the offender, which we don't have that absolute, jury hasn't convicted him yet, so we have to look at innocent until proven guilty part of it. But if he is the offender, is this something that kept him to ground? And so that's a positive. So we have to look at that. But we also have to look at the other thing of how many victims, or not how many victims, but how much information and how much debate was out there about everything imaginable. There's no part of this image that hasn't been attacked at some point. How much editing has occurred? I believe some editing occurred to this video, and we'll have to wait and see who's right, who's wrong, and because not everybody can be correct. And so how law enforcement will be able to work around this little incident, this train wreck, if it will be, or will the defense attack this one angle and this one strategy, we'll just have to see. Because there's a lot of times that, as you overthink and you over prepare for these cases. And so as you look at your cases and you realize, oh man, I wish I hadn't have done that. And it's in your notes and everything. I mean, everything's there. And sometimes the defense will jump on it. Sometimes they'll just go right by it. It means nothing to them. It's not part of their narrative, and they don't care. And you're so thankful for those moments, but you still worry about it. It'll keep you up at night. And but that's, like I said, you over prepare, and no one wants to look bad in front of that jury. Everybody wants the jury to believe that they've done everything they can right, and it should be done right. That's what we take the oath for. That's why in law enforcement we're devoted. And of course, you're going to have people that say that not all officers, or there's corruption, and there's always bad eggs. It doesn't matter in any job, any career path. There's bad eggs, and law enforcement is not exempt from that. Then we'll have the sketches. Now, this is probably giving me more headaches than anything. And law enforcement, of course, will have to face these of why certain images were kept back, even though they were created prior. And why is there such a age difference? Why is there such a difference in their appearance? And who created them, and what strategies were made? And you combine the two and throw them away. Everybody remembers the Doug Carter interview, and how would that be addressed in court? And it will be addressed in court for the fact that the defense, regardless if it's the new defense attorneys or it's the old defense attorneys, because we don't know yet, that's going to be left to a higher court, and we should probably know some of that pretty quick, because they're not going to mess around. But on these images, this will be one of those clashes that, like I said, law enforcement we'll address that issue. They'll have an explanation. Will it satisfy the defense? I don't think it's going to satisfy the defense. I don't care what the law enforcement says up there. I think the defense will have a pretty solid argument just about anything for the fact of what was released. Now, like I said, I may be surprised when the officers get up there and they're able to explain exactly why there is such a vast difference between these two sketches. We don't know. And a lot of this stuff is going to be addressed, and law enforcement will address it with the prosecution and prepare. And then we'll get to see, and the defense will get to address it also. And that's the great things about trials, that they will absolutely get to the root of all the information, and you'll get to see a 180-degree argument of just about everything. And now, of my train wrecks, I think I came up with 10, 11, 12 different areas. And you may have your own. Now, I didn't cover, but we only have an hour show. And I could probably come up with 20 or 25 different things that law enforcement will have a look at. But I picked the top 10, 11, 12, something like that. The tip. Now, this is going to be a huge thing, in my opinion, of why and how this Richard Allen contacted and provided information on that field interview, and that he was a witness that day and he witnessed certain things. For the fact that's exactly what he was when he contacted law enforcement, and he says, hey, I was there, and I was there during a certain time period that was of interest to you. And so, and I met certain individuals that you know about, and they know about me. And so he was able to go out there. And so this will be a huge issue. Not only what he spoke about in 2017, but also what he spoke about in 2022. And this would be one of those train wrecks. And this is now I do see this as an actual train wreck. Law enforcement somewhere, this got lost in the chaos and confusion of the early part of the investigation. And is it due to some of the other things that come right after this, of where they have to address Ron Logan's search warrant and the Anthony Shots issue? And I think that played a huge part in it. But but this here, the conservation officer and whoever was handling those tips, whoever was filing that information, all those people have the potential of, when they take that stand, they're going to get hammered. I absolutely believe they're going to get hammered by the defense. Now, the prosecution will set up a line of questioning to make them look as good as possible. But the defense, like I said, they have a task to do. And if this clue, that if it had been followed up early on, and would we be where we're at this stage in the case? I doubt. And so this is one of those that of all the things, this is probably the biggest train wreck that I actually think you could probably call a train wreck in this case. More so than just the officer preparing for the case. The Ron Logan search warrant. As a law enforcement officer, you'll look at it and you'll see that, oh, we have probable cause to go and search the property. The victims were found on it, and this is why we want to go look for him. We have people that have identified that that's him on the bridge, that he dresses in this manner. We've looked at his phone. He has pings. He's somewhere on the property during this. So they have an extreme amount of probable cause to get the search warrant. And so law enforcement, as you prepare for this, that you know that the defense is going to come after you on it. And for the fact they want it to look like absolutely that Ron Logan is the offender, and that you should have followed up on it, and you should have went down that path. And the FBI, of course, will they be called to the stand and be supporting as far as the defense views of, yes, you considered him a suspect at that time. You even put in there that he is the one responsible, and they will harp upon this. Now, I'm not saying it will absolutely happen, but law enforcement and the prosecution, but as law enforcement officer, you have to be prepared that if they go down this route and you're one of the officers that was part of that search warrant, you have to know the ins and outs of everything that was brought you to that point of why you were looking at him and why you turned away from him, because at some point you had to turn away from him and not pursue him anymore for the fact that we have someone else in jail. And so why and what information did you gather that told you that he's not the one that's responsible? And so they'll look at that. And once again, the defense will have an absolutely, totally different view on this, possibly. And they may run this route that, okay, y'all missed this. All right. Then, of course, we have the Anthony shots. And this is another one of those things that when you first look at it on its surface, you think, how in the world is this not related to this case in some shape, form, or fashion? And it may well be that. And we know that Libby was targeted and catfished. No ifs, ands, or buts about that, for the fact that we have the Anthony shots connection. And within the transcripts, there was mentioning of an interview of Keegan Klein about what went on that day, who is your alibis, who lives at this house, what conversations did you have, you spoke with the morning of. And law enforcement, these officers, that if the defense, the prosecution has to prepare that if the defense calls these people, that yes, they're going to hammer you on this. And it's another one of those cases, just like the Ron Logan thing. It's exact parallels to it, that when you go out there and you conduct these avenues and you are trying to make sense of it, and you're preparing this train wreck, potential train wreck, and this threat to the case, because it is, and of how and what turned you against following up with this one, and why didn't you pursue it further? What information, what data did you gather that says, no, this is the wrong path, we shouldn't be going down this path? And or we were continuing it down it while other officers were conducting parallel investigations. And so they found the offender prior to, and we never backed off of him, but we just don't have anything that ties him into it. And so, I mean, it's just one thing after another that when you look at these things, these are the threats to this case. And law enforcement has to be prepared to answer these questions in court. Or I expect, and I would expect it, that if this was something, a case I was working, this is what I would do and look at it, that, okay, where are the train wrecks, and how potential and how big of a threat is it to our case, and what ends can we tie it up to show and explain why we went down that path and why we stopped going down that path. Then we have the Richard Allen affidavit, the arrest, and everything that's going on with him. Not only what's going on with him now, but what went on with him pre-trial, pre-arrest, and what was his activities, and why wasn't he recognized as the bridge guy, the offender? When did he become a suspect or a person of interest? What brought that about? And law enforcement will have to, all that information, if this goes to trial, it's going to be clear as day, for the fact that he is the suspect. Everything has to be absolutely clear of why they suspect him, what evidence they have against him, how that evidence was gathered. And then, of course, on the opposite side, they are going to absolutely be attacked in so many ways of how they focused on him, why they focused on him, and why didn't they go after now the defense will say the true offenders, the real offenders, be it Logan, Keegan, Klein, the pagan group, the Odinist, whoever they want to throw under the bus. And why didn't you go down these paths? Because isn't it obvious? And they'll hammer them on everything of why they did that. And then we have the part that's thrown in from the correction part of him being in prisons and things. And some of this is what, and if the court will even allow it in. And because certain hearings will be held about what information can be used in court and what can be released, and even as far as his medical and his confessions, and how were the confessions obtained, how were they, who were they to, not only his family, but was it to any of the correctional staff, and how will the prosecution enter those in, and how will the defense attack them. And it can be a nightmare. But like I said, you prepare for these potential threats, these train wrecks, and everything will work out. And the better the officers, and we're not just talking about a single officer. This case, you're talking about, years of investigations, and how many officers will the prosecution call to the stands? How many family members, how many witnesses will they call to the stand? I mean, it can be a large group, and I expect it will be, numerous witnesses brought to the stand. And then, of course, then you will have the prosecution being able to question each one of those witnesses, and then, of course, bring their own, and then reverse the roles. And then we have with the judges, we had one judge step away from it, and then we have this judge that took up the case, and what has happened since then. And it's important for that in law enforcement. As a law enforcement officer, there were certain judges I absolutely loved to be in front of, and there were certain judges that, oh man, we this judge is because you have them. Not all judges are absolutely pro law enforcement, and they're not pro prosecution. They're not pro defense. I mean, there's a lot of them out there. Now, you do have some judges that have soft spots for law enforcement and things, but as far as when it gets to the prosecution and defense, not so much. But I've seen judges that, as far as law enforcement, be a little bit more lenient about how the courts handled us, because sometimes we'd be working, 16, 18-hour shifts, and then get called to court, and how would they handle us? And, they didn't want us to be testifying after being up 24 hours. And so they would take certain, and change the order of appearance so that we could testify out of order and things. Not always, but some would. It just depends on the on the judge. But anyway, this judge here, the law enforcement and the prosecution, they will know what type of judge she is, and what avenues and what can be argued in front of her. Of course, you have the judicial standards that have to be, that the courtroom, decorum has to be met. Some judges are different than others. I've gotten in trouble. I'd be in uniform, and I'd have my top button unbuttoned, and I get called back to the judge's chambers. The worst I ever got in trouble, I leaned on the bench one time, and that did not go over well with the judge. A few hours later, he explained to me, and you have to explain to him no disrespect meant, and for the fact that some judges, like I said, each of them have their own little areas of what they will stand for in their courtroom, and what they want. But law enforcement and the prosecution and the defense will look at the background of this judge. They're going to know everything about this judge, and we are getting a lot of in-depth information, and her background, everything about her is going to be made public. And is that right or not? It's fair game, because she is an officer of the court, and every decision can have an impact on someone's life forever, and innocent or guilty. And so we have to look at them and make sure that they're impartial, they're well qualified. And do I think she's well qualified? Absolutely. I know nothing about a lot of her past or anything, but just being on the bench for 20 years and having the support of the majority means a lot. And so of the judges that I knew that were on the stand, or not on the stand, but on the bench for 20 years, uh, meant something, because I've seen some judges one term, and that meant something, that they weren't qualified to be a true judge and represent justice. But all her decisions and everything will be brought to the public's attention, and we'll just have to look at it. Then we have the attorneys, the first set of attorneys. And knowing from law enforcement perspective that you look at these attorneys and what type of relationship have the attorneys had with law enforcement previously? What do they know about law enforcement procedure? Is it all book learned, or are they from the streets? I worked with some officers that turned into being attorneys, and they have a different perspective of what goes on in the law enforcement field. They understand it. They've been out there on the streets, and they'll give you some zingers sometime out of nowhere, because they know exactly what was going and what was the process as you moved and was investigating this course of action, rather than just being book learned. Neither one of these attorneys have that type of training as far as law enforcement that I know of. Now, with the new attorneys, I believe one of them was a law enforcement SWAT. I'd love to meet him, sit down, and talk to him, and have a cup of coffee with him, because we did that a lot. Attorneys and police officers, we just don't absolutely hate each other. We work together, and I've never, felt threatened by an attorney, and attorney never been felt threatened by me. So, but I have working relationships with them. All right. Now let's see. Then we have the train wreck of the 136 pages. Is it really a train wreck or not? I think it is a train wreck, not so much for the law enforcement part of it, but it was a train wreck for, I think, that's my personal opinion, that for the defensive side of it, that some of the information and what it led to, and some of the exposures of the crime scene images, that yes, it has great potential to be something of a threat to the defense's case. And will the courts be able to right the ship? Absolutely. And law enforcement will look at it and say, okay, this is what it causes problems for our side of the case, and this is how it helps us our side of the case. So law enforcement just look at it, and they'll do that for every bit of this I'm talking about, because you have to embrace the truth, no matter if it makes you look good or not. You have to embrace it. If it's true, it's true, and you just have to explain it. And sometimes it puts you in a good light, and sometimes it puts you in a bad light, and you try to minimize those bad light moments, but it does happen. And now we have the new attorneys, and this is unknown right now of how would they proceed? Will they team up with the others? I don't know. But law enforcement, as a law enforcement officer, I'd look at them and say, oh, one of these guys is a former cop. I understand him. He understands me. Does that mean he's going to be easy on you? No, doesn't mean he's going to be easy on you. And he'll address certain issues as they need to be, for the fact that they have one job, and that's defend Richard Allen and make sure that he has a fair trial. It's not anything other than that. Their biggest commitment is that they have to ensure that he gets a fair trial. And that's what we have to work towards and support, that no matter how much we are convinced Richard Allen is the offender. And my opinion is, going by what I saw in the affidavit and what information that I read from what statements, his confessions, and everything else, I have a high opinion that he is the offender. Doesn't mean that he is, so we're just going to have to wait for the jury to be convinced of that. But each of us have an opinion, and but we just have to look at it and move forward, and let the courts do their job and work it out. Oh, we got a wasp in here.
That's all that.
Okay. Well, if you see any of us dive away, it's because there's a wasp that just flew in, getting out of the cold weather, I guess.
Well, you need to fix it.
Okay. I will. All righty, guys. We got any questions?
You have several.
All right.
All right. So let me get caught up. Sleuth is in chat.
Hello. Good to see you, bud.
And I think I have a question from him.
Sure.
Unsolved Crime Uncovered is in chat.
Good to see you, sir.
That's a her. That's Christine, isn't it? Or is it not? Nope, that's Unsolved. Yeah, Unsolved Crime Uncovered. Did I say that right?
Okay. I thought it was a different one. Okay. Good to see you, ma'am.
Maybe I messed you up on that. I don't know if I did or not.
There's several unsolved out there.
There is. Okay, so I may have messed you up on that one. All right. And then what was the other thing? I'm losing my.
Mrs. Steve is getting.
It is Unsolved Crimes Uncovered. There you go.
Okay. All right. Yes, you
All
were
right,
correct.
So I missed you. I think I did. All right. So let's see here. Let me go this way.
Wasp.
And I'm going to be under there if it keeps coming towards my head. All right. So here we go. We are going to go with some blue lights. We got a bunch of things going on tonight. Ready? We got Fluffy Cookie.
Thank you.
I
Super sticker,
love
$5.
that name.
Yes, I had some with my coffee earlier.
They weren't all that fluffy, but
Yeah.
but they were delicious. All right. And Thistle, do nicely.
Gifted 1 True Crime Web membership. Thank you for your support.
We
Appreciate that.
And Kelt.
Gifted 1 True Crime Web membership. Thank you for your support. Appreciate that.
Appreciate that.
And for all the new members and things, we have shows on Wednesdays and Sundays is all our members, and then on Wednesdays we it depends on
you alternate.
We alternate.
All right, and then Cynthia Gaines is a new member, but she upgraded, so
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Appreciate it.
And Single Mom, True Crime member for 7 months.
Love it here. Well, we love you being here. We do. Absolutely.
sure
Thank
do.
you. It allows us to do things that we couldn't without y'all.
All right, and here's Miss Peggy.
$10 super sticker. Thank you. Appreciate that. Awesome.
Miss Dog Lover.
Seems like someone was trying to stitch up Justin Timberlake with a sketch on.
That's a good one. That's a good
Oh,
one.
me.
Now, this is the best
Okay.
question.
All right.
And then I've got some explaining to do on this one. Ready?
Josh the Posh. Speaking of explaining things, when's the last time you had contact with Sergeant Waffles? Did you have any involvement in his disappearance? I may need to take you in for further questioning. Sergeant Waffles has been busy on calendar duty.
He has been. We have a 2024 Sergeant Waffles calendar.
You go to the website or?
No, I haven't put it out there yet.
Oh, okay.
So I wonder if would that be the best spot to do it, or put it on the community page, or
Ever how you want to.
I will put the link on the community page hopefully tomorrow. Did you look at all of it?
Yes, but also Waffles took a trip with me,
Yes.
3 weeks ago.
Yes. He's been in transit, and then I stole him when he came back. So, he's been busy.
Yes.
He's been busy. All right. So thank you, Josh. We appreciate that.
He goes out and works cases with me sometimes when we need his assistance of the skeleton.
Yep. All right. And then I have Cynthia Gaines.
Gifted 5 True Crime Web members. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Appreciate
Absolutely.
that. Let's see here. All right. I have to check this. All right. Let's see here.
I'm looking around for that wasp. He was up there on the E. He's done moved off now.
Okay. I need to give a blue light to Peyton Place, donated to the 501c, but it doesn't show up in my thing on StreamYard.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your support on the nonprofit. It helps us a lot, guys. Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. All right. So, Oh, I know what it was. Solar Chef said that they were keeping their own tally and they were up to 612 train wrecks. So I appreciate you didn't cover 612 train wrecks.
Oh my
I
goodness.
appreciate that. All right, let's see here. And Miss Dog Lover, do you think there is any link to Evansdale?
There's a lot of coincidences, but having visited both locations, and actually I visited both locations in one day just to see the travel time. No, I do not think that we have no link or no information showing that anyone has knowledge of both locations. And absolutely, Evansdale, that location of where Lyric and Elizabeth was left is something that's absolute 100% local knowledge. And so the Seven Bridges, due to its remoteness and inability to be just found by a random offender. So I don't believe that they're linked in any shape, form, or fashion.
Okay. Yeah, let's see here.
Now, I do think that the offender will be much like Richard Allen, that he'll be a local and have that connection of knowledge of the area. That's the only parallel I see.
All right, and chat has been really active. So if I missed
Good.
something, I apologize. It's not intentional, I promise.
We appreciate everybody in chat, and we appreciate everybody being kind and respectful, and enjoy your time there.
All right, and from Dave, Steve, do you think the new defense team will take a more KK approach?
I have no idea. They have so many avenues, and they may embrace these attorneys because even the court asked the previous attorneys to work with them in some shape, form, or fashion, and so they have that avenue. But I do expect that they will have a approach that will probably be a little bit different, or not. I mean, the other defense team was so focused on the that pagan line, and is it due to something that some of the law enforcement agencies played a part in, such as I believe there's a report that went down that angle of it being some type of cult ritual or pagan group, and is that huge? If you plan on calling the FBI to the stand, anytime you have FBI take the stand and go along a certain avenue or line of suspects, and you can prove that your client absolutely has no connection with who the FBI was suspecting, or they created a report saying these are the type of individual or this group or someone with this knowledge is the one responsible, the defense is absolutely going to embrace them. As you know, because if it's on opposite poles of where their client is, yes, and I can't blame them for doing that.
Okay.
That'd be the only thing that outweigh the Keegan Klein angle versus of why you would go with FBI.
Okay. And this is from Sleuth and not a question, but it sounds very plausible. At True Crime Web, 2 sketches. I think witnesses not knowing they were witnesses trying to remember what they saw.
And you may be absolutely 100% correct for the fact that, how many people we meet every day that an hour later, if we were asked, or 2 days later or 3 days later, can you do a sketch for me? And how accurate would you be of just a random person? It's very difficult.
All right. And sees through. Why do you think Rick admitted to seeing 3 witnesses when there was really 4, yet never mentioned the witness that saw him on the bridge? Is it possible he never saw her?
Well, it's one of the things that all witnesses have in common. they don't remember every detail. And so it could be just as simple as that, that some of, being a witness, and even if you're the potential offender and you're out there and you're watching, you're looking, and you're focused on something, or your mind is sidetracked, what do you miss? And, I've sat out there on stakeouts and I've watched individuals walk within 10 feet of me and walk right past two officers, or we were undercover on one event, and they walked past us, looked right at us, and waved and went and committed a crime, not knowing that we were undercover. And I've also had the exact same thing happen when I was in a marked patrol car, of an individual walking past a marked patrol car and going and stealing a tag off a Frito-Lay truck. That was parked 100 feet behind me. I mean, so some of these people, they get tunnel vision and they're focused on whatever path and whatever's on their mind, and they miss details. Is that what he did? It's possible. I have no idea. Only the offender knows.
All righty. Okay, and let's go see here. And sees through at True Crime Web. In the PCA, they were looking for specific phone number. Is that likely to be an unidentified phone from the trail that day?
Well, in the Ives interview, he and when you look at that interview, Ives has some great comments and some investigative techniques that they were looking at about as far as phones. They were looking at phones that were there every day within the tower. And then they were looking at phones that this was the first and only time they ever showed up. And they were looking at phones that had been in the area and never came back. There was a lot of different ways that they were looking at these numbers, which is brilliant, for the fact that if with our technologies and how we're always in contact with each other, that criminals at times make these mistakes, and did the offender make that mistake. But it could be that there was a specific phone number that showed up for the first time on that day. And there was an interesting avenue, I think, that I spoke to another creator about that. That's what he thought that got Richard Allen brought up on it, is that that phone was reactivated during a certain time period. And if that's true, then that makes sense of why Richard Allen would be possibly located during a certain time period, because of reactivation of a phone that had been turned off for several years, and they were able to ping it to a location. Don't know if that's true or not, but that's a possibility.
Roxy just mentioned we only have 120 thumbs up and 284 in chat.
Appreciate it, guys.
284 watching.
Thank you.
Slap that button.
Yes, it helps us in ways that I don't understand.
Yeah. Yeah, we're just lucky to be here. Okay.
Yeah, I'm your Google expert.
Yeah. I am. Josh the Posh, what's the play in game of the removed counsel offering private pro bono status?
Well, I think that if that is allowed, I don't see a big problem in it. And I hope, like I said, the judge said that they would be removed from the case and wouldn't work on the case. But then the judge also during that initial time said that they had said that they would work with these attorneys. So I don't quite understand that. But the higher courts will come to some type of finding, and they'll correct whatever mistakes, if any mistakes, were made by Judge Gull. And and if no mistake was made by Judge Gull, the higher court may do what you're saying here, that, well, if the attorneys wish to be pro bono, but we're not going to put them back on the case, they're absolutely allowed to do so. And like I said, I don't think it's that huge of a deal of as long as Richard Allen gets a fair trial and represented, and the higher courts will ensure that.
And from Margaret, hi, Steve. In your opinion, do you think Nick McLean has what it takes to fight this case? I don't hear much about him, but I guess it all depends on what info he has and how he uses it.
Well, he's the prosecutor, and he has resources, and he has the whole funding of, and I know it's limited funds. No one ever has all the unlimited funds it needs to work these cases, but he is a prosecutor, and he took the job, and hopefully he is, able to find justice for Libby and Abby. And I haven't seen many missteps so far in this case. Now, the defense says that the discovery issues have been huge, but that would be corrected by the courts and everything. And we can't always take that what the defense says is absolutely true and what the prosecution says is absolutely true. But, if Nick McLean does anything wrong, then it will be appealed, and it'll be taken to a higher court, and then they'll have to readdress this issue. But so far, I haven't seen anything where he's messed up that bad on, if at all.
Okay. And from Mitzi, Mr. Steve, did they recover any burner phones at RA house during search?
I know they had a lot of phones, and I think out in the rumors mill or something, I've heard they had at least one or two of those phones that were purchased for whatever, that might be classified as a burner phone. I don't know. And is that some of the things that they would want squashed through the Frank's motion? Possible.
And Big Fish, Small Pond, any chance there's a geocache at Seven Bridges?
If it is, it's well before the fact that they don't have cell phone. So it's possible, but the signal is extremely, extremely rare out there. And I don't understand the geocaching thing, but I think it does require a certain amount of digital information. But does it exist out there? It's possible. I have no idea. I'm sure there's a way to find out about that. So if any of you guys out there can look that up and then send me an email, I'll let Big Fish, Small Pond know. That's a good question.
And just Deb, Steve, do you think the defense will bring up RL?
Absolutely. I mean, anything that the FBI is tied into, and anytime you have the FBI on it, and I was surprised that the two former attorneys didn't go along that route. I was absolutely, when I saw the Frank's motion, 136 page, I was, kind of shocked that they went down that path versus Ron Logan, because I thought that would be the strongest, for the fact that when you may have a local agency and that has a search warrant against something like Keegan, Klein or something, or the Indiana State Police, but the people view the FBI on a different level. That's the FBI, and if the FBI thinks you did it, then you did it, and so that carries a lot of weight in court. And so I was, like I said, surprised and shocked that the first two attorneys didn't go after the Ron Logan connection, and they may change their view and go that way. I don't know.
Oh goodness, I'm out of space. Look at there. Okay. And unsolved crimes uncovered at True Crime Web. What do you think about RA's involvement? Do you think there is any truth to the defense's claims?
Yes, there's going to be truth. There's within the Franks motion. If we just look at the Franks motion, is there truth within that document? Absolutely. Now, where is that, and when do I stop going down their full path of the pagan and all of that? Do I think that certain things show that yes, there's a ritual? And when I say ritual or signature, it's more that it's a ritual signature to the offender, not that it's a cult group and it was done as that. Only the offender, but to the offender's fantasy of what he's is having to do that's extra above and the committing the homicides, as far as that being a ritual signature to feed whatever fantasy he has. And with the bullet of Richard Allen's gun being there, and if that's true, and that science supports that, and absolutely the expert is able to link that bullet to his firearm, he was at the crime scene. If that bullet can be linked and it was could only have been left during the a certain time, then absolutely he's linked to it. And so, but inside that document, there's going to be a lot of truths that certain things occurred. Was there movement? Was there staging in the crime scene? Was there a changing of clothing and things of that nature? Absolutely, I believe there's some truth in those. And but also from that truth, people often, exploit and go down different paths and lead you away from what the final and real truth is. And I think that that has occurred, in my opinion, and that's where I differ from the taking the full defense's story that everything is true. We separate on that.
Okay, and from Miss Tracy.
499, is this case doomed? Are these girls going to get justice, or we're going to know what happened? How can it get back on track? It's the court systems, we look at all these cases, and sometimes we see where, you have such amount of information, and sometimes the defense wins cases that the public absolutely argues against. You have two people in the O.J. Simpson. Either you got the ones that absolutely he's guilty, and then you have the ones that say he's innocent. And where do you fall in that? And why do you do that? And but we on this case here, it's in the early stages. I absolutely believe it's well in hand. It's going up to the Supreme Court of Indiana. They're going to make sure everything is appropriate. And if they keep Judge Gull on the case, I'm happy. If they remove Judge Gull from the case, I'm happy. If they put the previous attorneys back on the case, I'm happy. If they remove them, I'm happy. I don't care. But it's been reported. It's being handled. The courts will absolutely make sure that he gets a fair trial. Now, of course, people are going to be screaming that it's corruption and all this other stuff. And I have absolute confidence that justice will come, and we just have to sit back, relax, don't instantly jump to the conclusion that it's absolutely messed up beyond all repair. There's other terms that some people put in there, but I believe that it's well in hand, and they will have their day in court, and justice will be found for them. Good
right?
question, though, Tracy. Thank you.
And polygraph because Nick wasn't totally truthful in his report
About the professor.
Okay. My trust with him is 0. So could he potentially put they found X at RA house? Could the cops have planted stuff at the house?
You know, and it is interesting that that part of the discovery that, and I didn't feel, and if that comes up, the investigators, as far as if the investigators were asked certain information about the identity of individuals, and law enforcement or the prosecution isn't forthright and offers that, and they have proof of that. Don't know that they do, but if you read some of the information that the defense put up there, but once again, we have to give it a grain of salt. You can't always absolutely give 100% just because an officer of the court says it. It will be reviewed and it will be looked at, and if there's any of it that's true, then those parties will be able to bring it into court, and there will be a ruling by the judge, and sometimes that ruling allows that information to be um, brought to the attention of a jury, and so, you know, lying doesn't ever pay, doesn't bode well for you as a witness. But and they said, could the cops have planted stuff at his house? There's always been claims, and there throughout history there has occurred where officers have planted evidence, um, but it's, you know, it's very rare, and you have to have, you know, evidence of that and proof of that, and I I don't believe they did. I think that that's a very rare, um, and I'm biased. I'm law enforcement. Um, did I ever see an officer plant evidence? No. Would I have ever allowed an officer to plant evidence? No. Had I ever heard about officers planting evidence? Yes. Um, and and some of those officers served time for doing that. But is it possible? Yes. Do I have any, or do I know of any evidence supporting that they planted stuff? No.
Okay. All right. And from Joan, Mr. Steve, don't you find it strange that no one talks about D. McVeigh being there at the bridge? He seems to have become invisible on both sides, almost like R.A. missing presence.
Well, like I said, some things are lost in the data, and that they're above suspicion, or they're maybe not above suspicion. But and what evidence, and why does law enforcement look at certain individuals more than others? Yeah, I mean, you know, um, I I don't know. I really can't tell you why certain things are strange and certain things are not. Law enforcement looks at this, and they each person that is at that bridge should have been ruled out uh, totally. And even Richard Allen's, how that was lost of him coming forward, is going to be what I think the biggest train wreck.
Okay. And from Mist, wondering what all they found at the house beyond gun that they want thrown out.
I think there is more, but is it the phones? Because he had a lot of phones. Is it the knives? He had a lot of knives. And then, of course, you can have all the other stuff that they might be possibly trying to identify from the animal type of DNA, hairs, fibers. Um, did he keep any of his clothing? If he's the offender and he kept his clothing, is there certain stains? Because Mrs. Steve can tell you that blood stains aren't easily washed out of clothing.
Or anything else for that matter.
And yeah, and not only from my experiments with synthetic blood, but from my
Real
from,
people blood.
yeah, from people stuff. But and you may be absolutely right that there is far more there, and I hope there is far more there, and that evidence will be brought for the fact that it if it proves that he is the offender, then that's the information that we need.
All right. Now, Copper Horse helped us out with this geocache
Okay.
app thingy.
Okay.
There is a map in the geocache app. When someone finds a cache, they pin it on the map. Others see you found it. You add your name to the cache note and hide it for someone else to find.
Okay. Has anyone seen any of the pins up at Seven Bridges?
So that's where that came
So
from.
I'll go look at that. I've never looked at a geocache app.
Me neither.
Neither. So thank you, Copper Horse. Appreciate it.
All right. And Brian Watson, if they crossed a creek in 40-degree weather, their clothes would have still been wet. Has that been mentioned?
You're talking about 24, almost 21 hours. I haven't tested it. I don't know what the exact conditions were. And we'll have to see how fast, it's one thing to say that clothes won't dry in a certain amount of time. As soon as I can get into that, the weather is consistently and we're just now getting to that time of year, I will test this and I will see how fast clothing dries. I'll try to match it down to the wind, the humidity, as much as I can, and I'll test that. But I know that has always been something that if they crossed the creek, why weren't the clothes still wet? And they would be wet. I don't know if that's true or not. There's things that can happen from body temp to humidity and wind, and that could dry those clothing or have the appearance of being dried. So we'll just have to look at that. But that is a great question.
I
And
won't be laying outside.
no, no, I won't. No, I won't make Mrs. Steve lay out.
No. All right. And from Miss Gail, do you think RA should be moved to a different jail?
Housing, a lot of people make arguments about prisons and jails. Whatever the Constitution guarantees Richard Allen to have, he's going to get. And he has those guarantees. Confinement's confinement. There's nothing plush about a county jail or a prison. And he's there for whatever reasons. And the court has said that's why he's there. And the higher courts will look at it at some point. And if a new judge is assigned, then of course that new judge will get to look at that, I'm sure. And that decision would be made. But there's nothing easy about a county jail, because everything's run by the jail administrator or the prison warden. And both of them are hard cases because they have to guarantee the individuals and also guarantee that people are held and serve their time, even if it's being held for trial.
Okay, and DP, is there any truth to the rumor that RA was tased in prison by Odinite guards?
I believe they said that they had to tase him at least twice. Now, could it have been guards of different religions? Absolutely. I never tased anybody. We didn't have tased. Now I sprayed them, OC, but we didn't have tasers. If I'd had it, I'd absolutely have tased them. And you couldn't say I tased them just due to my religious beliefs. And evidently, there's a lot of Odinite people. I'd never even heard of this before. And so, but yeah, from my understanding is that they have been interviewed, and they said yes, he was tased twice. Um, and is do I think that it was due to that they're trying to have this mass conspiracy against Richard Allen? No, I don't think that's the case. I don't think that there's a huge pagan group of individuals that got together and um, went out and had a sacrifice. Um, I don't think they have a group of people going through doing that. That's my opinion, and I think that the offender, whatever his ritual was, and his signature is what has led the FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit, whoever created the report about that there's some type of pagan ritual or something to this, and that the defense ran with it. But I think that's the only that the we're. I don't give the full weight of what the defense says, all the way down to that it's all one big mass conspiracy. I don't believe that's the case.
Josh the Posh, do you think, Steve, that RA's tech phones are still being forensically examined?
If they haven't gotten into them and got all the information out of them, yes, I'm sure they're still trying to figure all that out. But if they've gotten into them and got all the data, then of course those phones have been ruled out. But otherwise, absolutely.
And from Ivy Rose, does cold temperatures make things dry slower, or does it just feel like that?
Well, we have things called freeze dried coffee. And so things as they chill, evaporation, and but now that's an extreme of freezing, and that's how come I want to test this. And I'm not an expert in how fast clothing dries, hot, cold, or otherwise. And so when I test this, and I'm looking towards the day that I have where I can totally soak clothing, partially soaked clothing, and see if there's a difference of how clothing dries. And but we'll see.
All right. And Donnie at True Crime Web, what if there's lack of chain of evidence on the bullet?
And I know that's a big argument about when was the bullet found. I've heard that it was found the original search by the crime scene techs, and I've heard that it was found much later by someone on a news team. Regardless of how it was found, there will be a chain of evidence marking who found it, what date, what time, where they found it, and how it was secured. And there will be a chain of evidence from that point on. So there will be a chain of evidence on that bullet. I just can't tell you if the starting point is by CSI personnel or starting point is somebody out there on a news crew. I've heard it from both extremes. But once it's turned over to law enforcement and it's been entered in as evidence, yes, there is a chain of evidence from that point on. And that's one of those train wrecks that law enforcement is prepared, and they'll know, and that they'll have to face that. If it's the news thing, then of course you'll see the defense hammer them on it. If it's the CSI found it, it's not even an issue, guys. That yes, CSI found it during the initial search, and I've heard it both ways. We'll just have to see.
Okay, and one more. And from Big Fish Small Pond, did you look into the Vinlanders?
Oh no, well I'm have been so busy. No, I haven't looked into them.
Okay, and Miss Gail.
Gifted 5 True Crime Web memberships. Thank you. Appreciate your support.
Much.
Means a lot to us.
All right, so let me let's see here. Let's look here and see. I got to cruise. This thing has just been crazy. Supposedly from SSS, evaporation happens slower when it's cold.
Okay.
So we'll
Like
see.
I said, I don't know. I'll have to check
Yeah.
that up. I'm sure there's studies out there that tell you exactly how that process works. But even with those studies, I still like doing it.
He'll play with it, I promise.
Oh, yes.
All right, so let's see here. Almost done. Let's see here. Blue light. Thank you. Copper horse. All right, I do not see any more questions.
All right.
What a night, man.
Thank y'all.
Fantastic.
We want to appreciate everyone that's donated to the channel, bought memberships, our members, our views, the thumbs up. Share this video if you like it. We absolutely appreciate that because it allows us to go out and do things that we couldn't do without our community and all our supporters. We thank the mods, especially on
Y'all
busy
been
nights.
busy tonight. Thank you.
And means a lot to us. And we've got a bunch going on for the rest of the week. We're right now trying to close on some new property in Florida. So
watch the community page.
Yeah, Saturday night up
Iffy.
So we don't know. I may be on the road moving Mrs. Steve's vast amount of things to survive in Florida of her must have.
There you go.
Okay. All right, guys. But we appreciate y'all. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye, guys.
Y'all.